we can begin. And there's a reason why we started off with this prayer, because this prayer, now let's go to the meaning and discover what it actually means, because it's a very important prayer to help one to remove potential or possible obstructions to their success of understanding that I am the whole. So there are certain steps and certain preparations that we need to do before jumping into the higher teachings of I am Brahman and nothing is apart from me, everything is me. So this is a common mistake that happens in the spiritual world, where we get excited about the particular teaching and then we jump straight into the highest of the highest when we haven't even addressed worldly problems like forgiving our parents, resolving our communication issues, still, forgiving others, forgiving customers, being nice to each other. So we really are addressing the totality as a perfected human being. There is no skipping here. You can think of Ishvara as having a fleet of F-16s, and they will hunt your ass down if you try to jump into the higher teachings without first having attended or done your worldly duties. So that means one cannot just jump into, this is very common by the way, where a very young aspiring seeker will maybe go to India and then, they will put their beads, their hats, and they'll walk barefoot and they'll pretend like they're Ramana Maharshi or some enlightened being. But they still haven't resolved like their finances, their education, just common down to earth worldly stuff that we have to address to be a shining beacon for the rest of the world. So this very, very nice verse from the Chandogya Upanishad addresses that. So let's now talk about the definition of what it actually means. Okay, we have Om Apyayantu Mama Angani. So this is Mama Angani, that is my limbs. So Apyayantu Mama Angani. So may all my limbs grow. Now the question is, what limbs? And the answer is Vak, which is your speech, Pranaha, which is our prana, our vital air, Chakshuhu, which is our eyes, Shrotram, which is our ears, and Indriyani, which is our sense organs. So may they grow in their balam, which is their capacity. So here what it's really saying is we're asking for, as a form of a prayer, may all of my organs of Vak, Pranaha, Chakshuhu, Shrotram, Indriyani, Chasarvani, may they all grow in their capacity to what? Digest and absorb information that is coming to us. So now the question is, why would we ask for these organs to increase in their power or in their capacity to understand? So now let's get into this teaching. And just last night I made this mind map to sort of help us with digesting this. Okay, so the first line is really saying that if we summarize it, it's asking, let me understand that this body, that is your body that you think you own, let me convert it from a sense of ownership into trusteeship. So the question now is, what is ownership? What does ownership mean? And the answer to that is, when we are born, we have this body and we hang around this body till death. In other words, we naturally assume that because this is my body, it's my body, and therefore I can do whatever I want with it. You see? And this is where substance abuse and abuse of these senses originates from, out of this ownership that the body is mine and therefore I get to do whatever I want with it. On the other hand, if I understand that this body is what? Okay, let's ask the question like this. Did you before birth somehow put your brain together, put your heart together, create the corpus callosum, the two hemispheres, the hippocampus, the criteria, how they're going to release the emotion into the spinal cord and let it all, work together, and how the circulatory system, digestive system is going to work. Did you do any of that? No. See, in fact, when we get sick, what happens? We go to the doctor. In other words, that object, that instrument, which we think is ours, we take that very instrument to somebody else to fix it. Despite saying what? I own this instrument. As if I created it. So obviously now, this is our first responsibility, that is to convert our sense of ownership of this body into trusteeship. Now, what is trusteeship? But before I answer what is trusteeship, this conversion of ownership, that is, that this body is not of my creation, this body is a creation of who? Ishvara. How it's created, we will talk about that. What makes it different, we will talk about that. That is, I choose to offer and give this body back to whom? The original owner. So now the question is, what is trusteeship? Okay, so let's take an example. After World War II, what happened is we had several countries, especially Britain and France, they were the main colonial powers. In other words, they owned they were controlling other countries. Even Australia and New Zealand was a colony of Britain, and Samoa was a colony of New Zealand. So eventually these countries became what? They became independent from these colonial empires, from these colonial powers. So after World War II, suddenly what happened was the colonization was no longer required due to certain regulation and certain freedom. That is, certain things started to become different, that a sense of colonizing other countries was no longer necessary. So then what happened is these countries, which were colonies, suddenly became what? They became independent. And those colonial powers in those countries realized, well, now we are no longer the owners of this country, right? Just a year ago, they were what? They were ruling. They were, for example, Britain was in Australia, and they were what? Ruling Australia. And then suddenly, the country becomes independent. And then the colonial powers in that country, they say to themselves, well, now we don't own this country. That means what? We have to give our sense of ownership to the original owner. That is, to the nation. That is, back to what? The national government. So in other words, they had to surrender their sense of ownership of the country which they colonized back to the country, that is, to the original owner. So they had to become what? Owners to trustees. In other words, they had to convert being an owner into a trustee. So because what? Now they had to trust the local government, the national government, to run the country, including all of the people that are contained in the country. Does that make sense? So this is therefore our first responsibility as a mature, developed human being, and that is to understand that this body is not mine. It is given to me. So therefore, by that virtue, I can no longer what? Abuse it with substance abuse or overindulgence of my vak, prana, chakshuhu, and shrotram. You see? Okay. So, and of course, it is up to us. That is how we choose to use this body, which is what? A gift. So in other words, it's saying here, the first line is, by me surrendering my body from my sense of ownership to trusteeship, I choose to treat the body as what? A gift. It's actually an amazing privilege just to be a human being and to have the five senses, because without the five senses, example, if we didn't have eyes, how are we going to look at this? How are we going to ingest the shrutis, the scriptures? How are we going to enjoy a beautiful waterfall? If we don't have a nose, how are you going to enjoy, for example, beautiful, gorgeous perfumes or flowers, or example, there's wonderful cuisines around the world and tasty food. How are we going to enjoy that without a tongue? In other words, we're given these senses, and meaning what? We can expose them to what? An abuse, or we can expose them into that which leads to my self-enhancement as a human being. So therefore, it is a great responsibility owning your human body, knowing it's a gift, and through that gift alone, one can realize themselves if they choose to direct it towards what? Virtuous, moral, self-enhancing activities versus constant entertainment, constant chit-chat, constant opinions. We're not saying anything's wrong with that, just the whole lifespan in those summations, it just leads to basically self-entertainment. So one's just threw their body away for not of the highest and greatest use. And we would talk what is the highest and greatest use of the Vak, Prana, Chakshuhu, and Shrotram at the end. Okay, so now it's talking about Vak. In other words, Vak, Prana, Chakshuhu. So now let's talk about Vak. Vak is your organ of how you express yourself, how you communicate with the world. Which means what? We can either, once again, abuse it, or we can shed light onto it. We can shed light onto the world. We can provide guidance. We can get somebody out of their dilemma, or we can create further damage. We can create further darkness and further abuse of the world, who is already, if we observe, deserves a little bit of cheering, a little bit of uplifting. We don't need more darkness. We don't need more damage, because that's already on the large part seemingly done by people. So therefore, it is our responsibility to use our Vak to shed light versus give damage. Okay, look at these beautiful two beings here. That's what Vak, proper use of Vak is really. Okay. And also, here's one more opinion, that is your opinions, because, see, people are very receptive. We know this in our experience, because people don't know. They don't know what they don't know. So therefore, how can I judge or evaluate something if I don't know what I don't know? Therefore, the mind instantly, it adapts. It's very flexible. So it takes your opinions as the truth. And we don't realize this, but speaking with our opinions, uninvestigated, unaccounted for, uneducated, it actually ends up causing more damage than we could know. So we're bringing this forward because, as I said at the beginning, before we get into this knowledge, we want you to be very responsible with what you know, and fully developed human being that is. Okay, so now in Sanskrit, we have very interesting communication rules, and we're going to now share them with you, because in particular, there's 4 attitudes in Sanskrit of communicating, and we've had this for thousands of years, and some of us are still not practicing, and in fact, some of us are still creating communication programs which really just reflect these 4 attitudes, which we will talk about now. That is how to communicate in such a way as to shed light for both myself and the world. So let's get into that. Okay, first of all, we have what's called Satyam Vadam. Satyam Vadam is truthful speak. That means I say only what I understand. I do not speak unless I fully understand what I'm saying. And we can all relate to this when we add our own opinions, and it's completely unverified. We haven't taken the time to investigate or to research it from many facets. So Satyam Vadam tells us that we only speak when we understand, fully comprehend the depth of the topic which we are speaking. And this is an extremely important rule for communicating, because it underlies those who are the leaders versus those who are just, they just come and go. That is, they just share their opinion and they just leave as if nothing happened. And it is therefore your responsibility to practice Satyam Vadam. Okay, so now let's investigate what Satyam Vadam is a little bit further. Have you ever had a time where you needed to say something, but we didn't have the courage to say it? In other words, we needed to say what we needed to say, but something was holding us back, either out of not wanting to hurt the other person, or out of fear that they may perhaps leave me. This is very common in a relationship where either the man or the woman choose to hold back. Especially, I think it's more common with men. They choose not to communicate their feelings or their view, as in the hopes to not to hurt the other person, but that actually ends up causing more damage than good, both for the one that held back the opinion and for the other person, because the other always senses that something is not being expressed or communicated properly and completely and truly. It's very hard to not see it. And people are pretty smart nowadays. We're very sophisticated in our inner detection radar. So that means that Satyam Vadam is having the courage. See this lovely woman there? It's like having the courage to say what I need to say. So now let's talk about what's the opposite to help us understand what happens if I don't practice Satyam Vadam. And the answer can be expressed in the whole Mahabharata. It's a huge volume. Does anyone know how many pages Mahabharata is? 5,000 pages. It's an epic story. I think it's 5,000 pages. The whole Mahabharata war, and that's also Bhagavad Gita is contained in the Mahabharata, originated because the Pandavas, remember we talked about the Pandavas, that is with Arjuna, could not say no to Kauravas. In other words, the Kauravas with Duryodhana, the material, greedy part of ourselves, kept Just kept demanding, kept stealing, kept cheating, kept doing all sorts of immoral, unvirtuous actions. And the Pandavas, just kept letting go, forgiving, letting go, letting go, letting go. In other words, giving the Duryodhana from the Kauravas more license to re-engage in immoral virtue, that is giving him permission to keep declining the society and everyone else who's involved. So that is the danger, and this evidently led to the whole Mahabharata war. Because look, the Pandavas, they were good, they were nice, they were forgiving, but still they did not practice Satyam Vadam, did they? They just wanted to be nice, and they didn't have the courage to say no. See? So that is the courage to say, and that is to intervene and say no, or to say yes, depending on the situation. So that's the importance of Satyam Vadam. Okay. And of course, that's why mindfulness is so cool, because it even reminds me to mention the opposite is, of course, the passive aggressive approach, and that is when I know something, but I choose not to communicate it with you. That is, I'm passively, but I'm actually aggressive. And you always know when somebody's holding something back. Not always, but nearly always know when that happens. And that just creates further separation between us, which does not embody or does not stand up to the definition of I am the whole. It only creates I am separate from you. So it's our duty to be honest and courageous and to intervene and say what is necessary when it's necessary. That's the mark of a mature human being. Okay. Now we have Ruttam Vadam. Ruttam Vadam is this guy. He is a researcher. So sometimes we have Satyam Vadam. In other words, we have the courage to say what we need to say, but we say it and we're not aware that what we said is uninvestigated, and in other words, it's partial. So, and this is very dangerous because people usually believe, confident people, when they come up with confidence and they say what they say, and so, okay, he or she knows what they're talking about. But what we don't know is that information isn't complete. It hasn't been looked at from all of the angles. In other words, it's very narrow-minded. So Ruttam Vadam is when, before we speak, we ensure that what we speak is what it's being looked at from many different angles, either via research, either via talking to others, either via some time has been invested or put into what? Into expressing that which I express in a form of research or investigated effort. And this is another mark of a human being, knowing that the opposite of Rutam Vadam is what? Opinions. And that is so common today, isn't it? That is just social wedding, social party, event, music festival. Not always, but in most cases it's just what? It's just opinions. Like, I've got my opinion, you got your opinion, and people are just what? Vomiting their opinions to each other as a sense of what? Belonging in one group, completely neglecting that somebody in that group can be scarred for life. In other words, can gain another false notion, further clouding them from what? Investigating further about their nature of who they are. And this happens all the time. In fact, Rutam Vadam should be practiced whether it's a social event like a music festival or here in this class. Because, remember, the whole means nothing is excluded. That means someone at a nightclub is no different than someone in an ashram or a temple. Okay? So, therefore, Rutam Vadam is what I know, I don't say I know until I investigate. That is, only then am I worthy of saying I know. If I say I know with the lack of investigation, that is not practicing Rutam Vadam, that is practicing simple opinions. And the world does not need more opinions, it needs rational, investigated facts which someone has taken the time. And who wouldn't appreciate if someone's speaking out of a depth of understanding of the topic? We all appreciate that. Okay. So now, the question is, let's say you have Satyam Vadam, that is, you truthfully speak and you speak with courage, and you also have Rutam Vadam. In other words, whatever you speak has been taken the time to, has been investigated, has been thoroughly looked through. But now the question is, how do I deliver this? Is it because, see, sometimes it's not appropriate to deliver, even though it's truthful, sometimes it's not appropriate to deliver that to another person because that could be having a hard time right now and it's just not the right time to say it. And not only that, but how do we say it? That's why Priya Vadam means gentle spoken. In other words, gently, being careful how we deliver the message. Make sense? In other words, being cautious and empathetic and having the thinking, is this going to further scar them or is this actually going to, enhance the situation? That is being extremely aware and mindful. Is this circumstance, environment, situation appropriate to express my opinion right now? And if not, when and how? In other words, what kind of tone, what kind of delivery? And one of the reason we put Gandhi is he's a lovely example, someone who practiced Priyam Vadam from the beginning. For example, he came to the British and the British asked him, so Gandhi, what do you think is the future of India? Like, what do you think are the plans for India? And Gandhi said, very calmly, very composed, in other words, Priya Vadam. He said, I'm not here to negotiate plans of India. I'm simply here to ask you to leave the country. You are an unwanted guest. And he said it completely calm. He didn't come from anger. It didn't come from his aggression. It came from what's called depth of being. In other words, he said exactly what he needed to say, Satyam Vadam. He knew the facts, Rutam Vadam, and he said it what? Extremely naturally. It came out of what? Out of depth of being. In other words, what? The more depth a person has, the less aggression they have. The less depth a person has, the more aggression they have in dealing with confrontational issues. That means that Gandhi, in this case, came from a completely composed, self-centered, that is completely grounded, educated way, and he said this to and they didn't know how to handle this because like this man is coming up to such huge power, and Gandhi wasn't even afraid. He had the courage to come up to those who he knew could have arrested him. So this is called the depth of being, and that is Priyam Vadam. It's a characteristic of a mature human being, and it can be something of a lifelong practice. This is not something that we just gain one day, and this is really a constant practice. Okay, so in other words, it's mindful Satyam Rutam Vadam. Okay, we're not hurting others, and we're saying exactly what we need to say, but we are cautious how we deliver the message. So that's Priyam Vadam. Now, the last one is Hitam Vadam. Okay, so now let's say that I have Satyam Vadam, I have Priya Vadam, I've investigated my facts, but I go to an event and I just chit-chat. In other words, I don't contribute anything to the social welfare. In other words, it's all fine when I'm, in my little group of people, my little circle. But as soon as I go outside my group of people, then what? I just engage in the usual opinions, in the usual conversations, the weather, the Israelis, Pakistan, whatever it is. So Hitam Vadam always is being mindful. Is this conversation, is this going to lead to some educational or some learning space? In other words, are we going to learn something from this, or there's only other option if it's not that, which is this? In other words, it's just chit-chat, it's just entertainment. Now, once again, we're not saying anything's wrong with socializing or entertainment. It's just that the whole life spent with entertainment, that is because of what? My ownership of the body, is a complete waste of time. It's a strong word, but I'm going to say it because we say whatever we want in Vedanta. If you spend your whole life in just this kind of entertainment and sense indulgence, end of the life you have failed. In other words, you have not exercised the full faculties, and you have not taken advantage of the gift of having or being given the human body. Once again, there's nothing wrong with this, just being mindful of the gift. Because it can be interesting, right? Sometimes just a little bit of space, a little bit of difference. So that is Hitam Vadam. Okay. And the other common example of a violation of Hitam Vadam is, it's very often seen in the spiritual world. I'm from Byron Bay, so I've heard a lot about how the spiritual people they communicate. As soon as you're outside or actually in the circle of the spiritual world, there's a very common attitude, and that is to look down upon materialistic people. And that is to look down upon the scientists, the geologists, the mathematicians, the technological innovators. The point is, first of all, they have devoted their whole lives into perfecting the craft which they're doing. In other words, we spiritual people, in other words, those who are putting down, condescending towards the material, are benefiting from their innovations. For example, right now, this iPad's being used in the projector only because some person spent their whole lifetime figuring out optics, how light travels through optics and amplifies it so that it projects an image. Someone spent their whole lifetime in microprocessors and the motherboards, and therefore it's providing us what the benefit of living. So therefore we cannot look down upon materialistic people, because they have honestly taken their time to perfect their art and genuinely enhance the world. So that is a violation of Hitam Vadam. That is, we're not educating, we're just sharing, our opinion. In other words, it's a violation of all of the Vedams if we tend to be condescending. So the attitude, therefore, of Vak is from judgment to curiosity. And I think we have it here. There it is. Judgmental to curious. In other words, it's a wonderful attitude to employ, because that means what? We can learn from every single person. It doesn't matter what background, creed, sex, age, race, belief they have. We can learn from every single person if we go from judgmental, that is, we block them due to our own notions, and we just for a while see where they're coming from. And this is a mark of a mature human being, one who is open and willing to listen with a sense of curiosity to what another has to say. For example, my teachers, that's James and this is Nima, they're my two teachers. Her teacher is Dayananda, and he's extremely popular in the Vedanta. He's one of the best Vedanta teachers that's ever lived, actually. And he was very much welcoming all sorts of peoples from different life, dancers, singers, musicians, scientists, and he never rejected them. He never said, oh, you're just material people, you're wasting your time with this. He always learned something new from these materialists who were approaching him. So that's the kind of attitude that a character of a mature human being has, just curious, willing to learn, even though it's materialistic. That doesn't matter. Okay, so that's Hitam Padam. And so we can summarize this whole Vak as make the speech apyayantu mamangani vak prana chakshu shrotramato balamindriyani chasarvani, as please make my Vak, or my utilization of my Vak, proper. Okay, because now we have seen the depth of this first line of how important it is just to exercise our Vak. Okay, so now we have also pranaha. So now let's move on to pranaha, that is prana. And the prana we even have here on this diagram, which is expulsion, respiration, digestion, circulation, and your excretion. Prana is the circulation, that is both the physical circulation of the body, the health, that is the condition of the circulation, but also you can, if you want to look at it from a Eastern point of view, chi, your sense of energy, how it flows through the meridians. So we're asking, please increase my personal capacity, that is because balam is capacity, and apyayantu is made grow. So we're asking, please increase my personal capacity for prana. Now, why would we ask this? Because your personal capacity depends on how well your body processes input from the external world. That is, the toxins, the air pollution, loud noise, all of these things, your prana is responsible for processing that. So a common example is, if we go to Delhi, it's the air quality is not so good in Delhi, or Mumbai, or any country where the air quality isn't like here in Australia. Some people will respond with a cough. Some will respond with just aggravation, like inner aggravation. They won't cope very well. And some of us will be completely normal. So here we have three individuals responding completely differently. And the question is why? That is because the personal capacity to process the external stimulus, the external circumstances is different. So therefore we're asking, please increase my personal capacity, my prana, so that it can absorb and process this input in a more efficient way. And now, why would we want to increase our prana? For example, our circulatory system. Because if our prana is not optimal, that affects both the body and the mind. And that means what? One's not going to feel good, they're going to feel tired, and they're definitely not going to be then inquiring about the nature of the self, feeling tired, feeling fatigued, feeling not optimal. So we're not therefore rejecting your asanas, your Tai Chi Chuan, your Qigong, your Pilates. See, because all of these practices, they help with the body, the circulation. But not just them, also food, for example, affects your prana. For example, in the Western world, when somebody is diabetic, right? In other words, they go to a doctor, what's the first thing that a Western doctor will tell to a diabetic person? Cut down on your sugar, right? Now, in Ayurveda, that's totally opposite. Because what an Ayurveda medicine doctor says is, hey, look, everybody eats sugar. In other words, sugar is just sugar. In fact, there are people who eat way more sugar than you do, and they're totally fine. In other words, what? Their prana, their capacity to absorb sugar is working optimally, but the one that has attended, his or her capacity isn't. So what in Ayurveda happens is the doctor will what? Make some changes to increase the capacity for the body to absorb sugar. In other words, increase or optimize the prana. So now we know why we want our prana to be healthy, don't we? Okay. Now we have chakshuhu. So vak pranaha chakshuhu. Okay, so now chakshuhu is our eyes. Now the eyes are just a reporter of whatever we take our bodies, wherever we take our bodies. In other words, if you take your body to a waterfall, your eyes cannot help but to be exposed to a waterfall. We take our body to a nightclub, we cannot help but for eyes to report a bunch of bodies dancing like monkeys, basically. In other words, our eyes only see where we take them. That means what? They are completely under our control. That means I can spend, or you can spend your whole life taking your eyes where to lovely entertainment, lovely colors, and music festival, and all sorts of attractive options, with cameras, worthy picture taking. Or we can take our eyes to where? To the shrutis, that is, to knowledge, which leads us to a perfected human being. In other words, once again, it's all up to you how you make use of these organs. You see, that's why it's a gift. We all have the same, but where do we expose them to? That's your choice. That's why we're saying this prayer, so that we can come back down to earth and actually address what is so obvious and yet completely neglected. Okay, so that's our eyes. And similarly with our shrotram, that is our ears, it's the same story with shrotram. That is, we can take our ears to, like music and chit-chat and opinions and gossip and Netflix and YouTube and prank videos and all sorts of entertaining comedies, things that we all like and enjoy. And if we spend our whole lives taking our ears to those places, then it's not going to lead to our self-enhancement. So therefore, the optimal use of shrotram is what? To take our ears to those places which once again lead to our development as a mature, fully developed, capable human being, one that shines this knowledge. Okay, so therefore for gossip or for wisdom. So now the question is, what if there is, and there is, what is the highest and greatest use of using our vak pranaha, chakshuhu, and shrotram? What is the greatest use for a human being to use these five senses? Now the answer to that is it depends who's answering. Because if someone who just likes to enjoy nice cuisines and nice flowers and likes to enjoy life, they will tell a much different answer than someone in science. Someone in science will say, well, that the greatest use to use my senses is for discovering, anti-HIV vaccine, for example. But when we get through all of these opinions about relative worldly opinions about what's most important, the scriptures, the Upanishads say the highest use of all of your senses, which is what we have chanted, is Sarvam Brahmaha Upanishadam. That's what we said. Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam. Sarvam Brahmaha Upanishadam. And this line we will discuss next week, and it's the most important line, how and for what to use these senses. Okay, and here it is, highest, greatest use, Sarvam Brahmaha Upanishadam. Okay, now let's, because I promised this last week, get into our scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Finally, we begin the study of how Krishna teaches Arjuna way to understanding that everything here is actually not two. In other words, there's no separation between any one of us, and how to arrive to that understanding. Okay, but before we get there, I would love if you can please summarize, or someone's willing to summarize or something that has really been very important for you last week that we have talked about, that you're willing to share. Some idea or some concept or something that is worthy of sharing. Yes?
Yeah, I'm not sure the term is it imparts, the term about speaking truth, about speaking sincerely or from the depths.
Priya Vadam?
Yeah, say it again, sorry.
Priya Vadam.
Priya
Vadam.
Yeah, so what I've been alerted to in the past couple of months is talking about spiritual things to people that I know. Not in a real level of depth, but just conversationally. For example, I said, someone I know well, I think what I'm learning is that suffering is an essential part of life. It's not acknowledged in the culture, really. And this led to various conversations and so forth.
Right.
But the intensity, I was surprised at the intensity. So it got personal and all sorts of things. Yeah. So I shut up about it. And I tried it I tried it without thinking about it to a friend that I knew. And that didn't result in the same reaction, but there was depth of emotion. And just recently, it happened again, and I'm realizing I've got to shut up. So what I think to be truth, and it's important to me,
I see.
You have to be very careful that you're not delivering it in a way that is challenging to others, even if you don't intend it to. So my conscious intention will not be challenging, but the result was. So I'm learning, and especially in things spiritual, look, just leave it alone. It's not really up for discussion. Conversationally, I mean. Yeah,
relative. Still relative.
Yeah. So that's what I've learned.
Okay, good.
And I'm not still sure about how to approach it.
Yeah, there's no direct rules here. We're not saying how to communicate. We're just saying use the attitudes of these four Vedams, and that will automatically change the content of what we say that comes out of our mouth. So it's very hard to give specific rules because it's such a dynamic exchange between people, isn't it? Yeah, I remember also one time, many years ago, I sat down and a lady was telling me about her interest in Tantra, that is sexual union, and that was her spiritual path. And I said to her, why don't you just, quote, transcend that? Why do you have to, spend time rubbing yourself with other bodies when you can just realize you're the self? That is, you're already complete. Now, I didn't know many of these, these teachings, and she just told me, and I learned a lot. She said, Andre, maybe I'm just supposed to be on this path right now. And so, in other words, I was infringing. I didn't respect her where she was, and she gave me that line, and it taught me a lot about just let them be, just let them, because that's where they're at, and there's nothing that I can really, I was dumping my own opinion where she should be, but that's a violation. So people are always responding appropriately. That's a good lesson. People are incredible. They're like barometers of how well or how accurate we're doing with our own approach towards them. Yeah, so that's a little bit about conversations. Okay. Any revision about last week? Any particular thought or something of interest?
Last week you talked about, I think, doing a lot of work and perhaps not seeing a great result. I haven't had time to review the video, but I kind of maybe didn't quite understand exactly.
Yeah, sure. We use the example of a blue wall where, like, let's say the totality of all of your actions have created a blue wall. In other words, the texture and the quality of the sum total of all of your actions have created a blue wall. And now, let's say one day I look at the blue wall, I look at myself and I say, I'm not happy about a particular area about me, whether it's about what I communicate, how I share, how I, whatever it is. And I look at myself as blue, in other words, cold maybe, it's cold towards other people, and I say, I want to change this. So what I end up doing is I get the right tools, that is, I start to learn about how to communicate, and I take faint yellow paint, and I paint every time I learn something. It's like painting one stroke of paint over the wall. And then when I look, because it's so faint, you can hardly see any difference. It's still sort of blue, but there's just a little bit of yellow there. Now, and I'm like, well, I just keep painting, and then it's kind of like becoming green, but I'm not so sure, right? So in other words, it's so slow. In other words, what? Fortitude is a primary qualification for Vedanta. That is, persisting amidst hard times when it doesn't seem like any change or effort is occurring. So the more effort I apply, every time it's like doing another stroke of yellow over the blue. Now yellow and blue equals what? Green. Until it becomes pretty clear that, hey, my destiny is now green. But because it's so gradual, we don't really notice that abrupt shift, you see? It's just like if you're a mom or a dad, you don't see your kid growing because you're always with them, right? So you get used to that. Okay, so that just reminds us to keep being persistent despite those times when no matter what I seem to be doing, nothing seems to be happening. It's very common why people give up because they take it hard on themselves, but we're saying be patient because no action goes without some kind of modification of your vasana or your destiny, that is. Okay. Great. All right, now let's begin. So we know the story of, I talked about it in the first session between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. There was a huge conflict. The Kauravas have cheated on the Pandavas and they've gotten to be exiled for 13 years. And Arjuna, the Pandavas came back and they wanted their city back, Indraprastha, and also other possessions which are rightfully theirs. And Duryodhana refused every one of those requests. In fact, he even decided to keep their own city which they built. And the Pandavas thought this is completely unfair, and the only way to settle this dispute was to have a major battle at the Kurukshetra field. And then Arjuna came with the charioteer. Krishna was the chariot driver, and Arjuna wanted to take a view of both sides to get a different perspective. And as he came to the center, he saw his two teachers, Bhishma and Drona. And then he collapsed. He just couldn't go on because he felt emotional. In other words, he saw the truth that he's now going to kill these two characters which have both taught him the art of warfare and have taught him everything he knows about being a moral, a good character. And he also realized the totality of the situation, that it was just too overwhelming. We can all relate to that when the situation gets too tough and we get a little discouraged. So Krishna is having Arjuna is having a huge discouragement because he's going to kill an entire army. So how do we now get out of this? Let's investigate. Okay, any questions before we begin? Because this is the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2. All right. Chapter 2, Knowledge Yoga. To his distressed, tearful friend, who was overwhelmed by compassion by the thought of those he was about to kill, Krishna spoke the following words. So in other words, Krishna spoke to Arjuna. How does this see? Arjuna is now sitting in the charioteer. He dropped his bow and arrow and he's completely helpless. He has no will to fight anymore. How does this crisis justify the despair that has overtaken your mind? It is unbecoming for an upright person to behave in this way. It does not increase your renown, nor does it lead to an auspicious end. To give in to your emotions does not help you. You are a great warrior. Let go of these debilitating feelings and face the situation in a manly/womanly way. So, what happens is Arjuna has obviously come with a high spirit to do what he was meant to do. That is, that is his dharma, to lead the Pandavas and initiate this war. And suddenly, in his duty, he gets emotional by the realization of what he is about to do, and that emotion, it causes him to collapse. That is, to lose his will, to lose her will to fight and do what needs to be done. In other words, at this point, now Arjuna wants to escape the world. And this is very common in the spiritual world, where when the things don't go fine, or in the house or wherever it is, we want to run away from the situation because we get too caught up in our emotions. You see? And what do we say in the last session? When emotion is high, intellect is low. So here it's telling us that Arjuna was clouded by his emotions, and therefore he could no longer think straight. So he just gave up. And now Krishna says, how does this justify? Because you need to do what you need to do. You've been cheated. The Kauravas have caused so much damage, and now you're here, losing all hope to do what you need to do? How dare you? If you don't go on, the society will collapse. Who's going to fight these guys? They're just going to keep creating more damage. More society is going to go into a downfall. And Arjuna, because he's still emotional, cannot help himself but to Now we see what happens. Arjuna says, therefore, O destroyer of demons, how can I kill these brave men whom I respect and are worthy of worship? Now, why would it say destroyer of demons? This is actually a code in the Bhagavad Gita. And of course, if a normal person, they would go right through the line. But it's a very important point, because here it reveals to us that Arjuna believes that Krishna is just one of those kind of spiritual goofy types who deals with the mind. In other words, demons usually is the mind tormentation. And so Arjuna thinks Krishna is dealing with something as simple as just a temperament issue. But Arjuna is going to kill physical bodies. So Arjuna doesn't understand the difference. He thinks that what physical is separate from, the outer world is separate from the inner world. So that's what it's giving away here. Okay. It would be better to beg for alms than to kill my revered teachers, which is Drona and Bhishma. The pleasure of killing them would be stained with blood. It is not clear to me whether our deaths or theirs would be most beneficial. You see, so this reveals to us, because it's not clear to him what his intelligence has gone out. In other words, his intelligence is that which judges whether this is right or wrong. So that's gone out of the window. So therefore he says, it's not clear to me whether our deaths or theirs would be most beneficial. After we kill them, what use is living? This is just how an emotional person talks about. It's all about, the negative side of things, and nothing's working out. So it's given away that Arjuna is now being emotional. I can't see any course of action that will remove the pain that has overcome me, even if I were to gain an unrivaled kingdom in heaven or on earth. Okay. So once again here it's saying that Arjuna is sitting down and he or she is in a situation not being able to tell whether fighting or escaping or staying put is the right choice. He doesn't or she doesn't know what to do. And we can all relate to this when we get into a life situation that it's so overwhelming and we genuinely want to make the right decision, but we just don't know how. It seems like all sides are against us. In other words, all sides are against, what do you call it, against our odds. The odds are against me, like that. Okay. Now he makes a very important line, and this is the beginning of anyone's spiritual search. That is a mark of an aspiring seeker or a seeker that just hops from one school to the next, hoping to find the answer. And so Arjuna now says, I am faint of heart and confused about what I should do. That's true. So he's being honest. That's a good start. Satyam vadam. I take refuge in you. Please tell me what is best for me. So Arjuna is now saying, despite my ingenuity, despite my intellect, despite my ability, despite my warriorhood, despite my warrioresshood, despite all of these capabilities that I have, I don't know what to do. Please teach me. That's what he says. Teach me. In other words, he surrenders to what? Krishna, which is an embodiment, an archetype of the total. And he says, I don't know what to do. I have tried everything. I've gone to all the schools. I have read all the books. I have gone to all the seminars. I have inquired. I have spoken. And still, I cannot figure it out on my own. Please teach me. And this is the crucial moment when, or the difference between someone who succeeds in realizing the nature of the self and someone who fails. Someone who fails just knows too much. So they what? They don't spend too much, they don't spend a long time at a particular teaching because what? It's just not good enough. There's more, there's better, there's something else. And this is very common. We have Kashmir Shaivism, we have Taoism, we have different schools of Buddhism, we have different schools of non-dualism, we have Advaita also, we have so many schools, yoga, we have Patanjali Yoga Sutras, we have all of these schools, and they all seem very attractive, don't they? Because they all have something valid to share. And so the difference between one that succeeds and the one that doesn't is they cannot settle. In other words, they keep hopping from one to the next. And finally, when they have gone through all of these systems and realize that nothing is working, what? Only then they are ready to say, teach me. I have done it all. I have seen it all. Nothing works. Just help me because I cannot do it on my own. If you could have figured this out on your own, you would have done it a long time ago, believe me. Because we always succeed eventually if we put our effort. And yet no matter how much effort we put into discovering the nature of myself as Brahman, we fail. Because why? We're too arrogant and we're not ready to surrender to the teacher. And so therefore Arjuna now is saying, teach me. I am ready to surrender to the teaching. In this case, the teaching is Advaita Vedanta. By the way, my teacher made a very interesting comment, and I totally agree, because I also have many years of daily investment into the spiritual world, because I never had to work. I always had a business, so I was always at home, and the only thing that interested me was spirituality. So I've done a lot of other schools of thought and a lot of other, just you name it, I've probably done it. But my teacher, he's 75 now, and he said in 50 years of teaching Advaita Vedanta, if he would have found a better system, a more complete holistic system, he would have been the first one to know about it. And I'm exactly the same. I only settle for the highest of the highest. Nothing else interests me. Despite being in Buddhism, Taoism, and all sorts of other myriads of different schools. In other words, if there is something better than the teaching of Advaita Vedanta, hey, I'm going to cancel this instantly. But that's not going to happen. because Advaita Vedanta misses absolutely nothing. There is no way to get out of anything. We cover every single component. And in this case, we're now covering you, the jiva, that is the person who thinks is the person. Okay, so that's just a little teaching about where you actually are in Advaita Vedanta. That is, it's a holistic system that doesn't leave anything out. So, and now Arjuna is surrendering to the teacher. Therefore, the beginning of your journey, realizing the self begins. Okay. So now, so he says, having spoken thus, the great warrior cast down his weapon, said, I shall not fight, and became silent. Okay. In other words, he let go of his wanting to control the situation. Just let go. So now we're going to get why, because now what happens is Krishna tells Arjuna why not to grieve. You see, so what's happening is Arjuna is now grieving. He's about to kill his teachers and these people. But Krishna, who is what? An embodiment of the total, says, no, you should kill. Now, how do we get out of this? If everyone's a divine expression, if everyone is what, an expression of Ishvara, why would Ishvara, that is Krishna, say kill? How do we get out of that one? Okay, so we will get to that, but before we do, we want to cover the 4 stages of enlightenment. Okay, so what's happening here is Arjuna obviously doesn't know who he is. In other words, that's why he's grieving for these people that he's about to kill, who he believes are real. Just like a typical worldly person would think that this world is real. But Krishna knows it's not, it's just a dream. So Krishna therefore tells him why he should not grieve, but he, in other words, says that Arjuna is who? A samsari. Okay, so now we're on to a new teaching. A samsari means somebody who thinks that the world is real. Okay, in other words, I believe as a samsari that that my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, that my friends, that this is real. A samsari thinks or believes that this body, this mind, and everything else that you experience is real. That's a samsari. Worldly entanglements. Therefore what? It means a samsari is one who does not know that my nature is already whole and complete. That there's nothing missing, that I'm already free. That's a samsari who does not know that. And therefore what? Participates in the world and is invested in the world as if it makes a difference. In other words, what? I go, I say, I do, I dramatize. Why? Why would you be motivated to do all of these things? Because you think it's real. Would you do any of these things if you thought or if you knew that the world isn't real? That what you see, what you know is just a dream? Probably not. Okay. But Arjuna believes that the world is real. Just like every ignorant person on earth who does not know who they are. So now, the question is, how do you, I know it's a big statement, I can see it on your faces. How do you know if you're in samsara? How do you know that you're in an illusion? How do you know you're in a dream? So now let's talk about that. Okay, so here we have a nice summary. Okay, yeah, we just talked about that. So samsara is caused by, in other words, what causes samsara? Samsara is caused by self-ignorance and is recognized as 3 emotional problems. Okay, so here it says that self-ignorance, in other words, ignorance of who and what I am, and ignorance of who and what I am not. In other words, ignorance of satya and mithya, or the inability to discriminate the two. That's what a samsari is. The one who believes that what? Mithya, this is all mithya, the world is mithya, is real. That's a samsari. And so therefore what? He or she is invested into making the world what? happen or to what? Be in accordance with their likes and dislikes. In other words, tries to succeed, tries to make the world suit me. In other words, that's what a samsara is. I want to make the world suit me. So they go buy a house, nice wife, children, all of these things, because I think it's real. Okay. So this is what causes samsara. Attachment to situations, things, and people. So the question is, who isn't here attached to a person, a thing, or something in your life? See? Okay. So we're not calling anyone specifically that you're in samsara, we're just making a point. That is, if you are attached to anything, including this body, my health, my knowledge, whatever, your parents, the state of them, if you're attached to any of that or anything, like for example, money, security, any kind of pleasant a life that gives me a sense of what? Security and apparent freedom, then what? I am caught in samsara. And this is the state of 99.999% of the people on earth. There is one thing that we are attached to. One more, not one, but more, right? That's samsara. That's how Maya causes what? One to what? Neglect their nature, and then one ends up what? Entangled. That's what samsara means, entangled in worldly affairs. And so they keep what? Re-engaging in the worldly affairs because they think it's real. Yeah. Okay. And of course, Arjuna is having an emotional reaction because he is attached to his two teachers, Bhishma and Drona. So it's clear that Arjuna is in samsara. Okay, so this is called raga, but that's not important. It's just a Sanskrit word. And now, the second attribute of samsara is mental disturbance caused by expectation-induced attachments. Even the thought of loss of an object causes deep pain. So, see, okay, let's cover the last sentence. See, even thinking that I'm going to lose something, even the thought of that already gives me anxiety. Even the thought of, for example, losing a partner or losing something that, like losing the money in the bank, even that gives me anxiety. That's samsara. Not even losing, but just the thought of losing it. Why? Because I think it's real. And so what? I end up depending on it to give me my sense of what? Identification, my sense of joy, by depending on objects. That's what you call attachment, which is A. But mental disturbance also, which is caused by expectation. So what this means, mental disturbance, is anytime our minds are aggravated, anytime it's shaky or fuzzy, it's because there is a certain expectation of what I wish things to turn out. In other words, for example, let's say I want somebody to kiss me in a certain way or kiss you in a certain way, and they don't kiss you, they just shake your hand. Okay, so that means what? The expectation now is going to cause a little spike in the mind, and that's going to be aggravating. And we even like your boss, for example, doesn't give you a raise, or you don't end up making that deal in business, then what happens is we get aggravated or we get a little bit, pricked because we had an expectation. So why does it cause an expectation? And the answer is because, why do we get mental disturbance by expectations? Because a jiva loves being in control. And if it doesn't go according to the plan, that undermines the jiva's sense of controllership or a sense of identity. So that means what? Tell me, okay, if you are really in control right now of yourself, of your thoughts, tell me, write down a thought, what you're going to think in 3 minutes from now. Write it down. Or 5 minutes from now. There's no way, huh? You don't even know what you're going to think 5 minutes from now. What do you really control here? Do you control your digestion? No. What? We just put food in our mouth and we just, what? We talk, we play, and all the digestion is happening. Are you breathing right now, or are you being breathed? Yeah. You see? Are you firing off the electrical impulses in the brain causing you to understand these words? Or it's all happening by itself? So that means what? There is ultimately not a single thing, this is a hard statement, that we are actually in control. Everything is done for us by Ishvara. We are just what? Trying to justify, I did that. That's what the ego does. Okay? So this is the first step in understanding ourselves, who we are as a jiva. And samsara, therefore, is when the jiva has attachment and has mental disturbance, which are a result of the jiva's sense of controllership. Is wanting to control, but we just said what? You don't even control what thoughts you're going to have in 5 minutes. You have no control. Yeah, and this is a very hard statement for the jiva. Okay. Okay, what do I write here? Only Ishvara doesn't care what you expect. That's true. Only we care what we expect. And in other words, it only matters to me. It doesn't matter to anyone. And it doesn't matter to Ishvara. Because Ishvara sees everyone as perfect. Only a jiva sees oneself as imperfect. So then the jiva what goes into trying to fix itself, and nothing's actually wrong with the jiva. So, and that causes the aggravation for the jiva because the jiva believes it's not perfect. Yes. What's this?
What does Ishvara mean?
Ishvara, okay, when I say Ishvara, I'm talking about Ishvara 1 and 2, that's the total. But also remember this, when I say Ishvara, I'm talking about actually Mithya. Mithya, okay? Now, in the original, in the Vedas, when they say Ishvara, they always refer to both 1 and 2. Because see, we cannot separate here ultimately, okay? Because everything, there's not two. There's, remember the jumper and the wall example? The jumper is not separate from the wall, and the wall is not separate from the jumper. So they're actually not two, okay? So the answer to your question is, for now, when I say Ishvara, I mean both 1 and 2. But when I start to refer to Ishvara 2, which I will soon, I'm referring to everything underneath the line, that is Maya. Okay, so Ishvara in the Western world would be God, basically. But we don't use that word because it's got too many, we don't use that in Vedanta actually, we just say Ishvara. In other words, the creator of everything. Okay. So the creator of everything, therefore, what? Creates your thoughts, creates the digestive system, circulatory system, causes you to see, causes everything to happen. Okay. And C, we have Raja and Shoka and Moha. So in other words, delusion brought about by attachment and mental disturbance, therefore brings a lack of discrimination. Okay, so here it says that when we are attached and when we have expectations, that causes it causes our emotions to go high. Because you can relate it to your own life, right? When you have certain attachments or expectations about how things are to be, you're invested into it. In other words, there's an emotion fueling both the attachment and the expectation. So when that happens, like it happened with Arjuna, then we have what? A lack of discrimination, which is why Arjuna could not decide whether to go forward with the battle or to stay or to run away. You see? So this is very related to our own lives. Okay. So let's go to point number 2 now. How are you guys doing, by the way? Are you feeling good with the energy? Yeah? Okay. Point number 2 is samsara cannot be solved and removed on one's own. We just talked what samsara is, the belief that I am not already whole and complete. In other words, I feel small, insecure, unimportant, just not loved, That kind of feeling, which we can all relate to. That's samsara. So that's why I said in the beginning, it's not your fault. So who here is born, okay, and from day one you go, you know what, I'm gonna like not love myself, I'm gonna feel small, I'm going to feel insecure, and I'm just not gonna be confident. Which person in their right mind would make that kind of claim and therefore live that out? Nobody. Because we proved that nobody wants to last session, nobody wants to get hurt. I said, put your hand up if you enjoy suffering. Nobody likes to suffer. If you could have done something, you would have done it a long time ago. Therefore, it cannot be your fault. Therefore, then whose fault is it? Well, for now, let's just say it's Maya's fault. Because when Maya projects this body, projects this world that you see now, then what? We neglect existence, we neglect ourself. Now I'll talk about what do I mean when I say ourself, that is consciousness, but Maya is the problem generator for people, so you cannot blame yourself. So here it's saying that samsara cannot be solved and removed on one's own. We are helpless. When problems come, how should I react? Should I stand and fight, or should I take flight? And this is a fair question because of the emotionality. Okay, so here it's saying that it's very common sense, guys. If I am stuck in the, quote, illusion of who and what I am, if I am, quote, caught in Maya, and I'm trying to get out, what use would reading scriptures by yourself do when that would what? Imply, okay, why are we reading scriptures? Why are we trying to read our way into enlightenment? What does that imply?
We're not complete.
That's right. In other words, we're ignorant about our nature. And that means what? Ignorance is trying to what? Read the scriptures, meaning what? Ignorance is going to interpret the scriptures according to its ignorance. In other words, what? 80-90% of the statements are going to be misinterpreted. That's why I said from day one, scriptures are not meant to be read by a person who doesn't know who and what they are, because they cannot help it. A baby cannot help but to do what it does until it's told by the mother what not to do. In other words, a child, for example, would want to put a little finger in the plug, would want to slap the sister, pull hair, break the wall, until it's told by somebody who knows why and how things should be or how they are to play out. Same thing with samsara. If one is caught in samsara, if one thinks that this is real, there is in no way one can get out of this by themselves. And this is not a good statement for the ego, because the ego goes, you know what? That's not true. I've got internet, I've got YouTube videos, I've got, all sorts of resources available to my disposal. There is no way that can be true. I can just self-educate. No way. There's very few exceptions. We had Ramana Maharshi. I can tell his story, but it's a very interesting story. But it's so rare that it's as good as saying it's impossible. So therefore, here it says, number 3, to solve samsara, the help of someone who is not caught up in it is required. If you're seeking is sincere, a teacher will appear. If you are seeking a teacher, you are probably not ready for one. Okay. And to solve samsara, the help of someone who is not caught up in. So what is the common act that we perform when we have a problem? We go to what? Tony Robbins, for example, a psychologist, a therapist, an astrologer. Guys, every one of these are caught in samsara. All they're going to do is they're going to help you to what? They're going to help the jiva, that is the mind and the intellect. They're going to what? Cause some things to maybe calm down, look at it from a different angle. No problem, nothing's wrong with that. But to get out of samsara, forget about it. So all of these therapists and all of these, you got EFT, TFT, Gestalt therapy, NLP, hypnotherapy, you got all of these modalities out there, Psyche, kinesiology, David Hawkins, all of this stuff out there, it's all still mithya. And therefore, someone caught up in mithya can only help you to optimize your mithya experience. Not get out, just optimize it. In other words, have a better time in the illusion. Have a better time in the dream. That's all they can do. So we're not saying anything's wrong with that, because ironically, if you end up having a better time, you probably realize that there's not much in mithya, and then you probably end up seeking a real teacher to get you out of mithya. So in other words, it all ends up helping end of the day. So we cannot discard or disprove any of these therapists or psychologists, or because they're generally invested in their art, and they're helping a lot of people to end phobias and all sorts of psychological diseases. And number 4, surrender to the teacher. Feeling sorry for yourself or to the teaching. A teacher is the teaching, and the teaching is the teacher. When we say teacher, we're not referring to a human body, even though a human body is used as an instrument to provide the teachings. And so when we talk about, when we see Andre, the only purpose that Andre exists is just to be a mouthpiece for the Upanishads. None of this stuff, by the way, is Andre's. It comes directly from the scriptures. I personally have nothing to share. It's just opinions. So therefore, my only job is to provide the knowledge of these eternal texts which have gone endlessly and survived. Why? Because you cannot dispute them. You cannot break down their logic. They are indisputable. And so it's my job just to provide these teachings to those who are listening. Yeah. Feeling sorry for yourself because of your suffering is not enough to receive the teaching. Willingness to be taught is necessary. So now the question comes up. You ask yourself personally, how willing am I to be taught? Only you can answer that. That answer will determine whether you come back next time, next week, or not. Okay. So next week we will cover and we will understand why Krishna, despite being the total, says you still need to go on with your duty, despite it not seeming like a proper course of action to spill blood on the ground, right? And also, we will cover the line from Apyayantu Mamangani. We'll cover Sarvam Brahmaha Upanishadam. That is, we said the highest and greatest use of investing our energy, time, and effort of the body, which is a gift. Now we know, trusteeship, offering it back to Ishvara, to the teaching, is what? Sarvam Brahmaha Upanishadam. That is, in other words, that everything here is one, and I am not separate. I am that one. I am that Brahman. So next week we will talk about that line and continue the Bhagavad Gita as we get into more details. What we're doing now is just very, very shallow surface knowledge, because I don't want to kind of, overwhelm you with the depth. But we go into incredible depth about the Jiva, creation, Ishvara 2 and Ishvara 1. So there's no space for error or doubt. And that's how you arrive to this ultimate reality, that there's not a single doubt. Because, why? There are so many false notions that we carry about ourselves and the world and Ishvara, both Ishvara 1 and Ishvara 2, that they just postpone our success. Yeah. And we're all being a victim of that, being told the ideas that you destroy them with proper logic, and so they no longer hold. But that cannot be done with the Upanishads. And that's the only reason why I choose to teach this, because it's just the highest of the highest knowledge there is to offer. That's why this survived for so long. Okay, so let's close. Okay, just follow along silently or out loud. Oops. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kashchi dukha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. And it says, may all be happy, may all be free from illness, may all behold good things, and may no one suffer. Om, peace.
With karma yoga, is
Kali?
Karma yoga.
Yeah.
Is the object to remove the karmas or to restrain temporarily? For example, I understand karma to be rooted in desire. But if those desires remain unfulfilled, do they need to complete themselves?
Yeah, we're not getting rid of karma. You cannot get rid of it. You can only convert it into an action. See, we're not telling you to get rid of your desires because you're probably not going to get rid of your desires. Okay, we're saying that you can still do what you wish to do. It's just that it's done with a different attitude, because we're engaging with the world, aren't we? And the world is what? It's Ishvara. It's sacred.
Yeah.
So therefore, our attitude changes of our engagement or transaction with the world.
But in changing it, with karma yoga specifically, how do you maintain motivation and to do a good job at something? For example.
Oh, good question. Yeah. Okay. You need a higher ideal. We always say you need something to fall back on. Okay, because if this is actually one of the requirements for in some schools of Vedanta, is that one's not allowed to come unless they have something to fall back on, and that is some kind of passion or some activity that interests you, that is something that is meaningful for you. So you can always come back to that and continue your work if this doesn't work out. If I don't realize the self, then I can always come back onto my passion. So karma yoga at the end of the day is also finding something that you're passionate about, something that you're very good at, but the rest of us find very hard. You know that one? Like some of us find it very easy to, let's say, to make others laugh. But for us, we're like, well, I don't know how to do that. So for them, that's their karma yoga, in other words. So that we're not saying stop making people laugh. We're just saying, here's how to look at it, in other words. How to use what you're good at to exhaust your karma. That is to keep you absorbed in your action, which you're good at, so that it automatically collapses other desires. Because desires, the vasanas, are what causes one to re-engage into the world, and therefore what create new karma, which has to be addressed later on, and that creates a new tendency, and that tendency causes me to re-engage, and then I have to that creates a momentum to do it again, so that samsara continues. You see, the karma and the vasana, they're just constantly in a spin, and this keeps one entranced, ingrained, and very hard to get out of Maya. So karma yoga, therefore, says in summary, do what you do. We're not telling you to change it, just with a different attitude. Okay?
It can be quite subtle, I find, to
it
be
is
selfless. Because even if you can make other people laugh, if you're a comedian, you could do it for the thrill. You could do it for the ego and go, yeah, I killed it that night. That was me.
Yeah.
Got all those tickets sold. So do you have any advice on that? Just kind of distinguishing between when you're being selfless versus practicing karma yoga.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, you're asking yourself, what's do I have an agenda here? Am I doing this to gain something? Because if you're doing to gain something, what does that imply? That I'm not already whole and complete. Right. In other words, there's something missing, and it's my hope that by engaging in or transacting with this, it will provide me some benefit that will at least temporarily give me a sense of fullness. So that's why we go chasing for objects in the world, or chase relationships, because we think that by obtaining this object, it will fulfill me, or it will give me a sense of completion. And it does, but it doesn't do it permanently. It doesn't do the job permanently. And we all know this, that once we get into a relationship, it's just business as usual. A couple of weeks, months later, and then the same problems come, right? So karma yoga is also very good in relationships because it's a selfless service. In other words, I understand that I am serving another divine being here. And so what I choose to selflessly give, I choose to selflessly give as a form of giving and not taking. So that's the huge distinction. Am I doing this to give, or am I doing this to grab or obtain something? You see? So that's the answer to your question. Giving versus grabbing. Yeah. Because if you're the whole, you cannot help yourself but to give. If you think you're not the whole, you cannot help yourself but to grab, in the hopes to be the whole or to feel like the whole. Yeah, so that's how you know if it's a selfish desire or if it's a selfless desire. Yeah.
Your intentions. It's about your intentions.
That's right, your intention.
You can truly know your own.
Only you can truly know, that's right. So it's a very personal thing, but we can only give you the attitude of grabbing versus giving, you see? So in a relationship, you can just what? You can give instead of what? I want sex to get something, or I want a relationship to get something, to get whatever it is, versus I want to give. So therefore, karma yoga is actually wonderful because you can still do exactly what you do, but with a giving attitude. Yeah, and even then, can the ego jump in and say, "Well, I'm gonna give here," but actually it's trying to grab. So you need to be very careful there, and only this knowledge will help us to discern a little bit clearer the difference between giving and grabbing. Yeah. For that, it just takes some time to be totally impeccably honest to oneself. Yeah.
Thank you, Andre.
So welcome. Hey guys.
Clear on the difference between mithya and samsara?
Mithya is samsara.
Same thing.
Samsara is just being absorbed and enjoying mithya, and thinking that's all there is to it.
Do the two words mean the same thing, or are they doing it different?
Samsara is mithya, mithya is samsara. Samsara just means being caught up in mithya and thinking that's all there is to it. Yeah. Okay.
I've also come to understand, like the karma yoga is about upholding the dharma.
Yes, dharma.
Yeah, I guess you get into that. So, in that sense, I was going to say, say in our society, how those traditional structures are sort of disappearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's disappearing?
The traditional structures that sort of help sustain everything.
Right. Well, okay. Apparently, it's disappearing.
Apparently, well, it seems like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would say that that's false.
Well, it seems like. I mean, who's saying that? It doesn't seem like that to me. It doesn't seem like that to. See, you don't have to worry about the world, because Ishvara takes care of the world, and He will keep taking care of the world, and it always has taken care of the world. So all of these efforts to save the world and try to change the world, change society, what's just a reflection of? My belief that by changing the secular, I'm going to change the sacred. Because what I think that the world, if the world's happy, because I depend on the world, that's samsara, depending on the world, and therefore if the world puts a smile, I will put a smile. When there is only you here, there's only one of us here, you, I. Okay, now we will get to this understanding. How is it possible that I say there's only me here, but then from your point of view, there's many of us here? You see, so that's what Maya does. It creates separation, it creates differences. So we have to now collapse those differences and arrive to this understanding there's only me here. That all of this is just happening in me. There's no you over there and me over here. It's here, it's just now. Yeah. So that means mithya is the world and mithya is eternal. So you don't have to worry a single.
You don't need to worry about the future.
No. Who causes
change and diving into chaos?
That's just ego trying to project its own sense of insecurity, and it superimposes it due to lack of understanding onto the world. When in fact, take the history of the world.
Are we talking about mithya or satya?
Mithya.
Okay.
Yeah.
The apparent.
Apparent. Apparent means it doesn't last. Let's take, for example, the Roman Empire. You know, there were like 400 years of ruling? Was it 400 or 800 years of ruling? The greatest empire in the world and that time we had more resources than ever. You thought there's no way they would ever collapse. Question, where's the Roman Empire now?
It's dissolved.
Exactly. Ishvara takes care of everything. You don't have to worry about a single thing except realizing your nature.
Sorry to interrupt. So again, when you say Ishvara, you're talking about 1 and 2, the total.
Ishvara means, yes, the total.
Yeah.
Yeah. In this case, the creator, Ishvara 2. Yeah. So Ishvara 2 takes care of 8. Always has to. It's taking care of your breathing right now. It's taking care of your ability to listen and comprehend these words. So you don't have to worry about anything. And when we do one day the Mandukya Upanishad, which is called the King Upanishads, get ready to have your sense of reality completely destroyed. That is your waking state, your dream state, and your deep sleep state, which you think are real. That's going to get destroyed. And you're going to realize there's actually nobody here but just me, consciousness. Okay. So these are very high teachings, but we first prepare you for this, because what happens is when one realizes the nature of who they are, sometimes they fall into depression. Do you know why? Because they have depended on mithya from day one. They have depended on what? On the world to give them happiness. And when suddenly one realizes there is nobody here but me, and there is no happiness out there, then that's a big shock. It can be a real big shock. And we get this very often in Vedanta, is that when this knowledge hits, when this knowledge really starts to be assimilated, one just like, oh my God, like I've got nothing to stand on anymore. Because I depended on the body, I depended on food, I depended on girlfriend, boyfriend, on all of these things for my joy, and none of this is real. That's a huge shock. So we have to slowly prepare you for this, So it's a very systematic, careful approach how we do this.
Yeah, very unsettling if you're not prepared for it.
Exactly, because see, and I totally understand why, because you think that the person you are is real. You see?
Carrying it up for many years. So.
Yeah, exactly. So we try to, it's a survival instinct. You try to protect it. And when suddenly a teaching comes in and destroys that person and the nature of who you are, who is infinitely times more complete, you could say blissful than the person, hey, you will never miss the person again, believe me. And it's a pain in the ass being a person. Because you got to worry about what others think of me. Am I confident? Am I insecure? I feel small. I have likes in this. All of these things, they're just a pain in the ass. You see? Yeah, seriously, you have to maintain them, all of that stuff. So it's actually a real pain being a person. And when you finally realize that it actually is a pain and you're ready to be free, to let this person go, then a teacher appears. Otherwise, Ishvara is not going to put you in a situation where if you learn this, it causes one to, to have a massive breakdown. So, we take it very, very slowly and carefully. Yeah. But see, so moksha isn't what you thought it was. You thought it's just everything's blissful. No, the person dies. There's no person. There's no Andre here. It's just consciousness speaking through this body. Yeah. So you got to be ready for that. So we prepare you little by little. You wanted to say something?
So you said, the person no longer there, right? Is that... So how do you actually know?
Right. If the person's there or not?
Yeah.
Okay, because see, that's not possible to be answered. Only you know. That's a good question. Only you know. It's like, it's kind of like falling like in love. You just know. Nobody else knows but you. Okay. In other words, there is no more dependence on the body or the world for one's joy. In other words, nothing that comes, nothing that arises affects me. Nothing, when I say me, I'm talking about consciousness. Nothing touches or changes me, consciousness. In other words, a bad event or a good event, it doesn't touch me. It's just mithya. And that's one way you can know. And only you can know. Nobody else can. We can only lead you to that. But you have to do that final reversal of the I from the body to consciousness, where it's permanent.
So nothing touches consciousness.
Nothing touches consciousness.
Well, I mentally get that.
Theoretically.
Yes, that's right. However, there's still this body, this instrument,
Right.
So, would emotion still be, experienced? How is that different to when you...
No, there's no difference. The person still continues. Now, I'm not say the person dies, but see, there's always a paradox here. The person continues.
Yeah.
The relationship to the body, the mind, and the intellect changes, or to the world. In other words, the world is still continues.
Yeah.
Nothing changes, but it's just known to not be real. So if the body, for example, gets ill or something, it doesn't, because I don't depend on the body, it's like the body's dying, I'm not dying. I'm just the witness of the body, just like I'm the witness of your body.
So if any your family member dies,
Right.
even though that's not real, but...
Yeah, but the body still has a reaction because of the conditionality.
Okay,
You
so
see?
you would still...
Yes.
Experience
Yes.
that sadness.
Of course. Yeah, nothing changes. But it's known not to be real, you see? So it's like witnessing the body crying, witnessing the body going through this, whatever it is, life still continues. But it's because there's a re-identification with the original I, with consciousness, and consciousness has no attribute, it's just conscious, it's just aware. That means what? Whatever happens, it ultimately doesn't affect me. It affects the body, but it doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
So that's why we keep stressing this relationship between satya and mithya. And I said this from the start, liberation is freedom from experience. So now you understand why. Because experience happens all the time, doesn't it? We always experience, don't we? Everything. Even this is an experience. And we what? We mix ourselves and we what? Get invested into that experience and we make something of it. Because we believe we're the body and the mind. But what? Freedom from experience means what? Experience continues, mithya continues, but it doesn't touch me. I am free of experience.
Well, but isn't that I don't get touched anyway? We just thought, or we just believe we're this body or this mind. So it looks like it's affecting us.
Yeah, okay. That's because there's a superimposition of this. We're going to talk about how the subtle body superimposes itself onto consciousness, and then what? We believe that because that consciousness is now what? Contaminated with the experience, I believe that it's happening to me. So we destroy this subtle body by making you know that the subtle body is not you. So you now know that no matter what contaminates, it's what? It's just the subtle body. It's not. So it's borrowing from original consciousness, and that's why we think I am sentient as a body and the mind, when it's just borrowing from original consciousness. You see? That's what's called adhyasa, superimposition.
What is subtle body again?
What's what?
Subtle body. Oh, that's a jiva, is that right?
Jiva is, yes. Jiva is you as a mind and the intellect.
And the subtle body?
The subtle body, it consists of the mind and the intellect and your ego, the doer, the one who enjoys. Yeah. So don't worry, we're going to cover all of this.
Does that chair contain awareness?
Yes. Everything is awareness. Now, the question is, I don't see awareness there. I see awareness in the human body because the human body is what? Vertical. So it's very easy to see awareness or consciousness in the human body, isn't it? But as soon as, or an animal or a plant, but as soon as we go into a rock, like how is a rock consciousness? How is it sentient? Okay, now I'm not going to answer that, but when we get into the three gunas, we will see. So it's going to become very, very clear. Yeah. Yeah, it's just that. It's just covered with, tamas.
Also, before you realized, okay, so there's space between you and I right now. what is that space now to you?
There is no space. See, as soon as you say space, then you're also implying a time, aren't you? Because there has to be a light traveling, and then therefore that implies time.
Okay. I can't. Okay, so this identification with body causes fear of death, fear of pain, but I can't see how Karma Yoga, Bhakti, Jnana would chip away at that identification. It just seems so absurd. So I have faith in it, but it just seems so absurd.
Yeah, okay, good question. It prepares the mind. The mind will not understand what's being talked about, collapsing time, space, duality. It will not understand that until the mind is prepared. So we prepare you. We prepare your mind. You need to have a very clear, sattvic mind to understand this. And so we're not discarding any practices because, like, for example, Kriya Yoga, Karma Yoga, you got Course in Miracles, like forgiveness. You got all of these systems that are or Buddhism, different types of Buddhism, very good at working with the mind and purifying the mind. But the problem is they stop there. In other words, you have a very qualified person who now thinks that enlightenment is what? Everything is peaceful, everything is wonderful, everything is just lovely. And I was in this trap for many years. That's called stuck in sattva. Stuck in sattva. You know that experience that you come back from a psychedelic experience, ayahuasca, and everything's just so wonderful. You want to hug everyone. You don't think about anything, or everything's just fine. I could just rest in myself. Oh my God, I'm good. I'm just good. Everything's fine. That's called stuck in sattva. Oh yeah, we know that very well, right?
Apparently that lasted.
Yeah, it lasted for me for 6 months. So I was like, oh, this is it. Journey's over. Yeah, because the first time I did ayahuasca, I never drank a sip of alcohol in my life, so I had no idea what an altered state of mind was, and I went straight into ayahuasca. Oh my God! And so I had no means of comparison, like what's happening. So because of that innocence, I was able to draw a lot of good information.
Do you still want to explore Maya?
No, because
But there's so many galaxies.
No, see, it doesn't matter. The galaxies are only possible because you think about them. Where is the galaxy when you're not thinking about it?
But do you still want to see this drama play out?
It's only apparent. There is no drama. Everything is consciousness. It's just It's just playing out apparently. There actually isn't no even Maya. It's just apparent. Why do we say it's apparent? Because it comes and goes. And there is only There is only consciousness taking on the form of Mithya. And what did I say? Second session, wherever there is Mithya, that's exactly where there is Satya. So how does it make sense to try and explore if I am the whole? You see why fascination drops away? It only continues if I think I am separate, so therefore I want to get to know something else. But if I know I'm the whole, and then everything is dependent on me, then what motivation do you have to want to continue seeking? If that which you are seeking is also part of you.
What about the motivation to stay on as a teacher?
To what?
To be a teacher.
That's Ishvara. That you have no control over that. Yeah. Because when there's the jiva.
Is that a new karma you take on, or?
No, it's not, because karma then falls away. There is no more karma. It's just it's like Ishvara controlling directly. And it always is. It's even doing it now through you. You see? You're speaking. You think that's you doing it? No, that's Ishvara.
I don't know anymore.
There's nothing here but Ishvara. See, that's what I mean. We just remove your ignorance. You think you're a person. There is no person. It is Ishvara. It's the same essence which I am. There's no difference. So we remove your ignorance about who you think you are as a body and the mind. That's what moksha is. Yeah. So that means what? You're then free no matter what happens. You're just an expression of that which Ishvara wishes to do with your body and your mind. You no longer control, because you don't understand, you never were in control in the first place. It was only the ego trying to own control because it didn't, it thought it was separate. And to preserve its separateness, you needed to, continue its separation by thinking it's
gets a kick out of all of this.
Yeah, and it's a great trickster, isn't it? It's portrayed in some schools as the great trickster because it's actually the most. We call Ishvara a beautiful infinite intelligence, a beautiful ignorance, beautiful infinite ignorance. Because tell me one thing that isn't beautiful. Come on, look at the ladies, they're beautiful. Look at a waterfall, beautiful. Look at the flowers, beautiful. Look at the tiramisu, it's beautiful. Everything's beautiful. And that beauty is what hooks us into samsara. It's so beautiful, it's so hard to get out, isn't it? Yeah, there's always something else, huh? Oh, maybe I'm going to bachelor degree. Oh, maybe now I'm going to be a good lawyer. Now I'm going to be a good husband. I'm going to be a good mother. I'm going to be a good programmer. I'm going to be a good president. And just one after another, they add up and we waste our whole lives in what? Mithya. And we never pay attention to what? Satya, who I am. And that's why what? Reincarnation happens and then it just keeps going round and around until one day you realize there is nothing in this world that is worthy of pursuing. That's why the qualifications for Vedanta are so high, because those who come in, they still haven't finished their duties with the world. So they're still pulled out there to the world to do other things. But if you do that, yes, you could be successful, but it's unlikely because, why? You're probably going to end up going that way and forget about this because the pull is so hard. I'm not saying it's the case, I'm just saying it's a very observable phenomena in our tradition.
I just came back in to ask a similar question. I was considering, like, there are two ultimate aims I felt for life. One was to know what we are, and the other was to lead a full life.
Yeah.
And I was thinking something what you said during the talk was that it's okay for some people to go off and live these full lives without wanting to
That's
know
right.
their true self.
That's right. Because they're not in control anyway.
And I was wondering if I still need to go out and do that before I come here, or is it because of the fact I'm here, does that mean that I'm ready?
Nobody can answer that, actually. Yeah, it's very hard to... I mean, how does one even answer that?
No, that's probably the right
all I can...
answer.
All I
You don't
can...
know,
Yeah.
Or do you just have to feel it? Or...
Feel into it, right? Yeah, it's very hard because, you see, Ishvara, sometimes... Did you ever have a moment where something happened and you didn't know why you were in that situation, only afterwards you realized, maybe like a month ago or like a couple of years later, you realized why you were in that situation, and you realized it was actually the best thing that's ever happened to you. So, see, the mind cannot interpret the purpose while it's in a situation. It can only interpret it after we've gone out of the situation. So that's why I say it's very hard to know. But one recommendation is, yeah, only you can know, man.
So then, when is the right time? I mean, if I knew a cheat code to life, wouldn't it be to live a full life till I'm old and then just take that leap of faith into this?
Yeah, well, that's a good question because usually what happens is the more you get caught in samsara, the more you have reason to continue samsara. It doesn't work like that, you see, especially in the West. Because, see, look at it this way. You live, a young life, and then you live a full life, and then you think about, I want a retirement, just to rest. And then you already caught up, into what you've built, what you've, made money and all the people, So you just have a natural tendency to continue that.
Okay.
So that's why it's so hard to get out of Maya, because we're so invested, you see? Yeah. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just honestly saying it takes, serious courage. Yeah, but we're not saying get out physically. See, that's a renunciation taken on a wrong basis. Renunciation means I still continue with the same people, but I just pay less attention, not out of a lack of love or ignorance, but I put more attention inwards. That is self-inquiry. You see, so you can still be with your partner, but just you understand I'm here for myself, ultimately. It's not one of the selfish things I'm saying.
You're here for your big self, the ultimate self.
Yes, for that. I'm here I'm here to realize myself. So therefore, and nobody can help me with that, can they, except me. So therefore I have to reserve time for that to be realized. Okay? So life is fine, but it's got to be that point when you start turning attention inwards, from out to in. That's a sign of a spiritual, mature seeker. Versus, constant, like a dog, just consuming experiences. Yeah.
So would you say the aim of life is to fulfill our potential?
Fulfill your potential, yes, that is inclusive of realizing yourself. Because if we exclude one, that's denial. And everyone here has a job. Ishvara assigns a job to everyone. There is no escaping here or trying to put ourselves aside. Every person, like, why do we have a lawyer and then we have a musician? Who gave him that job? Ishvara did. You see? In other words, Ishvara assigns roles to everyone, and it is our duty as a human being to fulfill that role while knowing who you are.
That role can change, right?
And that role, your svadharma, that is, changes when you exhaust or you play out that role. In other words, as soon as you played out a role, you gain a new role. So no, there's no breaks here. There's no breaks here. You don't get a single break, ever. If you think you got a break, you're probably not, you're probably in some violation of dharma. So every human being, yes, there is break, because see, when you do what you love, it doesn't seem like work anyway. So it is actually always a break if you are following your dharma. You see? So Ishvara is always giving us new roles to fulfill, to play out, because it helps us to exhaust those vasanas.
They're based on our tendencies, which
our tendencies,
yeah.
And also you don't have to necessarily exhaust those tendencies, because when you realize I am the self, then it doesn't matter. See, you no longer identify with the body and the mind, and those tendencies belong to your subtle body. But see, that's all mithya. So if I know I'm not any of that, then what does it matter? It becomes irrelevant. So in other words, you just let the body, the person, do whatever they need to do, but it doesn't bother me. When I say me, I mean consciousness is unaffected. Yeah. So that means, in summary, yes, fulfill your potential, and that potential will change. But amongst that, know the highest and the greatest purpose for being here is Sarvam Brahmaha Upanishadam. That is what we will talk about next week. Yeah. Okay.